So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ong, but I'm not actually from Singapore. So I was born in London, but grew up in Hong Kong. Dan's a very hard act to follow, a bit like coming on stage after Michael Jackson. So I started designing my own shoes in 2002, really because I'd been working for other people, and I really felt like I wanted to create something that was classic, but not stuffy, elegant, but also edgy at the same time. So I got a factory to sort of take a chance on me. He made 8 samples. I put them in a suitcase. And this is all before Facebook and Instagram. So the only way I could get my product in front of people was literally to take them in front of people. So I had this suitcase. I walked around London. I knocked on a lot of doors. I presented my shoes to a lot of people having lunches, and suffered a lot of rejection. But I finally got into a show during London Fashion Week, and very fortunately in my first season got into 30 doors worldwide. So I was very fortunate in that that profit from the first season then allowed me to grow my business in a very organic way. Aesthetically, I have a graphics background, so it's natural for me that my styles look quite linear, and I also like the idea of sort of making things very sculptural. So this shoe for my first collection is actually wired in the front, and that allows the wearer to manipulate it as they wish. And then through my sort of various collections and fast forwarding to 2008, it's always been an aim of mine to sort of make things as simple and as clean as possible. And for those who work in craft will understand that when you try and make things simple, technically they become really, really complicated. But it was one of the things I actually enjoy, is making my life a bit harder by making it look simple. So in this shoe, for example, there's no stitching on the edge of the shoe at all, and there's also no horizontal line because I didn't want it conflicting with the sort of rays that are coming out of the shoe. I also like conflict of perception. So, for example, in this shoe, this material is very highly used in footwear and accessories, where it's very tightly lasted, so that it creates the illusion of a shoe being solid gold. And for me, I wanted to do the opposite, which is make it look like it was fluid and so flowing down your foot. And in this shoe, which was from a collection called Conceal and Reveal, it was all about what people choose to show and what they choose to hide. So I exposed the back to show a little bit of lacing, and that really was sort of like my interpretation of sort of skin coming, I know it sounds a bit gross, but skin coming apart to show lingerie, which is traditionally worn on top. And in 2004, I opened my first shop in London, and if you've had, like for me, you know, my business has been very organic, so I opened the shop and suddenly found myself with loads of space. So you start designing new product, and one of the first things I did was men's shoes, because men's shoes is something I really enjoy. And then I got asked, well, how are you going to make it different? And for me, it wasn't about making it different from the ladies. In fact, I kind of wanted to bring the two together. So it still had to have that design ethos of being classic, but with a bit of a twist. And so I took a quite traditional broguing shoe, and then I hid the Superman S in the toe. Really, that was me sort of taking the mickey out of men's egos. So this shoe is named after Richard Donner, who's the director of Superman movies, as well as The Goonies and lots of other great 80s movies. And I subsequently named all of my men's shoes after film directors, because to me, they command a lot of respect, they have a lot of power, but they're always behind the camera, and that to me is what I wanted my ideal customer to be like. This shoe was named after Anthony Minghella, and I was really pleased that the actor Jude Law got a pair, because I very much had the talented Mr. Ripley in mind, which is to have quite, again, a traditional leather shoe, but I took apart the middle, replaced it with sort of like a brushed wool suiting material to sort of show sort of like a schizophrenic side of shoe. And the Chaplin's named after Charlie Chaplin because although he is known to be a comedian, he's actually quite philosophical, quite dark sometimes. And so it's quite a formal high shine shoe, but then what I did was I elongated the toe. Not so much that it would be clown-like, but enough to give it that little bit of feel of contemporary and that little bit of humor. And then I then went to open 5 shops around London, and so I had to design even more stuff to fill it. So I then went into small leather goods, so bags, wallets. We even did umbrellas, belts, sunglasses, and also giant, put everything from your life in your bag. So one of the things that I think happens in a brand is when you start introducing lots and lots of different products, you're actually trying to sort of corner your customer. And I didn't want to do that. Instead, I wanted to sort of do the opposite and let the customer choose. So for me, even though the brand and the range expanded, is I needed each shoe, each product, to sort of be as versatile as possible, and that allows the wearer to style it in whichever way they want. And so this was reflected in some of the campaigns we did. So it went from, quite sort of pretty in this particular campaign I did with the English National Ballet, to something slick, 90s feeling, and then also to look at the shoe even in an abstract form. And then from sort of still life, we did a lot of film work. And one of my favorites that I'm going to show you in a minute was done in 2010 when the iPhone 4 came out. And when it came out, it was pretty exciting. And I found this skater guy who was filming in a skate park and then editing it all at once. And I was like, I've got to work with this guy. And so, again, with that sort of conflict of perception, I wanted to use someone that was a little bit controversial. So I got Elena Gibson, who was the world champion pole dancer at the time. And I wanted to make a film that was really, really beautiful. But then the other side is it was shot and completely edited on the iPhone 4. So this is just a small clip. In your eyes is where I can begin. What's the use in trying to leave here? I can't do those things, but I try. When you create a collection that's versatile, you then start attracting a lot of different sorts of other creative designers. So in terms of catwalk shows, I was lucky enough to be commissioned by designers as versatile as someone pretty like Temperley to someone sort of quite modern and contemporary like Martine Sitborn in Paris here, and also to something quite classic to Aquascutum in London. I really enjoy working with other people. So one of the things I love doing is collaborations. And Dover Street Market was a very good stockist of mine who were very supportive, and they asked me to do a special capsule collection with them. But generally with collaborations, it comes about because I need something. And Globetrotter is one of those examples. They had a shop opposite me in Burlington Arcade, and they came in right about the same time that I needed a set of luggages. So quite serendipitously, we then produced this set where the black body and the white handle are exclusive to Beatrix Ong. And then along that same vein of needing something, Grey Goose came along and asked me to do limited edition bottle for them, which they then sold. And this particular special bottle that I sort of handmade myself got auctioned off, and the proceeds went to Central St. Martin's Scholarship Fund. And then this collaboration was one of my favorites, and that's with Nike. They, obviously, as a shoe designer, you sort of approach looking at a shoe and going, well, how can I change up the patterns? And it's Nike, so they've done everything under the sun. So what was interesting for me at the time was people sort of painting on shoes, and that sort of idea of applique of adding to something then became how I worked on this project. My interpretation of a Chinese paper cart was made in Italy and then hand-assembled and hand-applied in Italy. This particular project is also a good example of how relationships with your suppliers are incredibly important, because we were all there sort of like pasting these phoenixes together. Because the other thing is they're different from left to right. When they first approached me, I chose the blazer because I like the style, but unbeknown to all of us is Nike actually retired the blazer right after this collaboration. So they're incredibly collectible, so much so that I don't even have a pair. In 2011, I got honored with an MBE from Her Majesty on her New Year's Honours List. And this was particularly a proud moment for me. So growing up in Hong Kong and it being a British colony, it was a little bit surreal to meet the Queen, let alone get sort of like a medal and honor for her. So this is me in Buckingham Palace shaking her hand. In 2014, I journeyed to China in what became sort of, to me, a bit of a homecoming. And I got offered to work on this project. And although I sort of designed all my shops and worked with teams on them, this was like the first time I was working on something that was completely external from Beatrix Ong. And it was a 10,000 square meter space set in gardens, set in a lake in China. And the brief was to design and curate a space that was British. And the first presentations that I got were like a lot of red telephone boxes, Tower of London, these beefeaters. And I said, look, if I'm going to do this project, this isn't how I'm going to do it, because I don't think it does it justice by taking a red bus and putting it in the middle of China. So what I did was I wanted to start a conversation about how the two cultures are the same. So I took elements that were similar in both. So for example, the rose, we built a rose garden. The rose is a quintessentially English flower, but it was actually first documented by Confucius in China in 500 BC. We also had a tea party, which again, it's quite quintessentially English as well as Chinese. And the space sort of opened in October 2014, but it also had to change all the time. So for me, it also ultimately was a retail space. So I wanted to also, even though all these sort of experiential things were happening around, it was actually to keep it really clean so that the products became the hero of the space. In 2015, I got an email from Viacom, and they said, email went, would you like to work on one of our characters from Nickelodeon? And I was thinking, that's a really strange request. So I wrote back, because I'm not one to say no straight away. I wrote back and I said, can you tell me a bit more? And they wrote back and I said, it's for our character SpongeBob. And for those who don't know, and most of you don't know me, is I'm a huge SpongeBob fan. So I had to play it a bit cool and not write straight back, yes. So I waited 30 seconds and I said, yes, let's talk about this. And so Viacom and I actually came together, created a completely separate IP called SpongeBob by Beatrix Ong. And I got to redesign, reinterpret SpongeBob. My project followed Jeremy Scott's Moschino collaboration with SpongeBob. He's also a huge fan. But I would never necessarily wear SpongeBob yellow. So for me, it was about creating something that could be put on everything, because for me, SpongeBob embodies humor, and humor is universal and it's for everyone. So what I did was I took the different elements of SpongeBob, his friends, Bikini Bottom, and created a toile de jour that then went on to menswear, children's, women's, skateboards, makeup, bags, etc. And we launched it with Colette in Paris. And it continues, because it's a 5-year licensing deal, it continues to be one of my favorite things to work on. In 2015, the Victoria and Albert Museum collected 2 of my styles, which was a huge honor. One from my archive, but then also they inadvertently forced my hand in launching my new concept collection, because when they were looking through my stuff, they said, "What are you doing next?" And I said, "Well, I've been working on this for 2 years, and here's a proto." And they said, "Yeah, we want that one." And I sort of let it lay for a little bit, but then when I got the letter saying, "We've now allocated the museum numbers to your products, when are we getting the red shoe?" I was like, it's time to launch the new concept collection. So the reason why it's a new concept is because all my stuff previously was exclusive. And for me, I was kind of getting tired of things being exclusive, and I wanted to change everything, make everything inclusive. So I had started developing this collection that was much more democratic. So whereas you see like a high heel shoe on a certain person in a certain environment, this was meant to be worn by everyone, everywhere. So this is my great uncle who very much influenced the range because, and this is him in Singapore actually with his friends, because when he was forming the revolution, he had to, a lot of the time, be undercover, and he was trying to escape Imperial China. And so that sort of idea really, really appealed to me, which was to make a shoe that makes you kind of invisible because you don't really need to sort of show off or stand out. So this is the mold of the shoe, and it's actually based on Beijing Laoxia, which is like a Beijing old shoe. The other part of the other concept of the collection is it's fully sustainable and recyclable. And this interested me because all the soles of those shoes are made out of old cloth kung fu uniforms that were then sewn together. So I then reinterpreted the sewing into the tread of the shoe, and then the materials into sort of the undulating pattern. This is very much, it looks terrible here, but trust me, it looks better on the shoe. This is a vulcanized unit, and it means that it's incredibly hard-wearing and incredibly comfortable. And this very attractive item is the insoles, which are made out of charcoal and bamboo. So they are naturally deodorizing, anti-perspiring, and they even ionizing, so they help in your circulation. And for me, when I found this out, I was like, it's the obvious thing to put in a shoe, so I put them in all my shoes now. And this is the first product when named after my great uncle. So it's unisex, it's seasonless, and it's about slowing everything down. The uppers are made out of offcuts. They're completely reusable, and the bottom of the shoe is completely recyclable. I launched it with the Design Museum in London because I wanted to step away from people looking at it as a fashion item, as a throwaway item, as a trend-led item. It's not. I designed it to be long-wearing. I designed it to be classic. And so I introduced it to the patrons and members of the Design Museum because they very much would look at it as an object, which is what I intended them to do. I subsequently became a member of the committee, the development committee of the Design Museum. That meant every other shoe that I presented would always go through the patrons and members first. And as you can see here, this is really the epitome of my sort of simplifying things as much as possible. And lastly, in 2016, I got approached by a little-known magazine called Wallpaper. And the brief was to create something for a hotel. And for me, shoes they're always really messy, right? So you go into a hotel room, you kick them off, you put them away, but when then you go out again, you're like, where are my shoes? I've got to get them out. So for me, it was less about hiding footwear, but more about displaying them. So I came up with something that is meant to act also like a curiosity chest. Each box is made out of American walnut, and each box has a little glass window in it so that you can see what's inside. And because my idea of collecting is actually a vertical action, and I wanted to make it to look quite natural, is I wanted to make a shoe tree. And so this would grow as your collection grows. And it's also completely modular, so you can stack them together and have your own shoe forest. And this is the finished item that was launched at Salone Mobile at Wallpaper handmade. It happens that I had some really great news 2 weeks ago when I got an email saying your piece has been selected to be in part of Handmade Classics, and it's going to open in Singapore. So this piece is actually going to be on display as from tomorrow night at Gilman Barracks. So if you do have time to see it, please do. Thank you very much.